Stop trying to be seen. I'll say it again. Stop trying to be seen. Because the version of you that needs applause is the version of you that can be destroyed by silence. And that is how most people live. One compliment away from confidence, one insult away from collapse, one rejection away from questioning their entire worth. They call it ambition. They call it self-expression. They call it building a life. But underneath all of it, for many people, it is just hunger. The hunger to be noticed, the hunger to be validated, the hunger to be chosen, the hunger to feel like they are somebody. You were taught that becoming somebody is the goal. Be impressive, be respected, be admired, be ahead, be unforgettable. But look carefully at the people who actually get those things. Are they free, or are they just well-dressed prisoners guarding an image they can never put down? This is not a video about becoming humble so people like you more. This is not a video about pretending to be small. It is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not thinking less of yourself. This is about something much deeper. This is about burning the need to be anybody at all. And what happens when you finally act as if you were nobody? Because strange as it sounds, that may be the moment you become powerful for the first time in your life. Not powerful because people fear you, not powerful because they admire you, not powerful because they finally see you. Powerful because they can no longer control you. And once that happens, everything changes. The hidden exhaustion of being somebody. From the time you were young, you were taught to build a self, a name, a personality, a reputation, a place in the social order. You learned how to enter a room and measure yourself against other people. Who has more status? Who speaks with more confidence? Who gets listened to? Who gets interrupted? Who gets admired? Who gets ignored? And without even noticing it, life became a stage. You started adjusting your words so people would like you, hiding your flaws so people would respect you, curating your life so people would admire you. Even your pain became performance. Even your healing became performance. Even your confidence became performance. A man posts his success online, not because he is happy, but because he needs proof that he matters. A woman stays in a dead relationship, not because love remains, but because being unwanted wounds her ego more than being unloved wounds her heart. A son spends 20 years chasing achievement, not because he loves excellence, but because somewhere deep inside, he is still begging his father to say, "I'm proud of you." And some people will hear that and say, "No, that's too harsh." But is it? Look around. How many lives are secretly built on emotional debt? How many people are not living, but performing a version of themselves they hope will finally be approved? This is what the hunger to be somebody does. It makes your life belong to other people. Your mood belongs to their praise. Your peace belongs to their approval. Your self-worth belongs to their attention. And that is not power. That is dependency wearing expensive clothes. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus warned that if you place your peace in things outside your control, your life will never truly be your own. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that fame is empty because the people praising you are just as unstable as the praise itself. Seneca looked at the crowd and saw a dangerous thing: people surrendering their minds to public opinion and calling it normal. And that is exactly what most people still do. If your happiness depends on what others think of you, then your life is no longer yours. Think about that. Not metaphorically, literally. If one compliment can lift you, then one insult can shake you. If applause gives you identity, silence will feel like death. If attention becomes oxygen, being overlooked will feel like suffocation. That is why so many people are anxious now, not just because life is hard, but because they are carrying a version of themselves that constantly needs to be maintained. A fragile identity, a public self, a carefully defended image. And defending an image is one of the most exhausting jobs in the world.
because images cannot rest. Images must be updated, protected, explained, repaired, advertised. And the more attached you are to being a someone, the more terrified you become of embarrassment, of rejection, of failure, of being misunderstood, of being ordinary, of disappearing. So let me ask you something. How much of your current stress comes from real problems, and how much of it comes from protecting an identity, not your survival, not your safety, not your values, your image? Sit with that, because that question alone can crack open a life. Maybe you are not tired because life is heavy. Maybe you are tired because your ego is. Maybe what is draining you is not reality, but performance. And if that's true, then the solution is not more recognition, it is less attachment.
The silent power of no longer needing to be important. There is a strange kind of strength that appears when you stop trying to be important. You stop interrupting people just to prove you know something. You stop over-explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop entering every disagreement like your identity is on trial. You begin to conserve energy. And energy, when no longer wasted on ego, becomes presence. You listen more, observe more, react less, need less. And the world reads this differently. At first, people may think you've become quiet, but what has actually happened is that you've become difficult to control, because people can no longer bait you. They can't control you with praise. They can't manipulate you with shame. They can't own your mind with gossip. They can't provoke you into proving your worth. Why? Because you are no longer trying to win the performance. Most people are easy to control because they are desperate to protect an image. Call a man weak and he'll do something foolish to prove he's strong. Ignore someone addicted to validation and they'll start performing harder just to be noticed. Question a person's intelligence, beauty, status, importance, success, and watch how quickly peace disappears and theater begins. This is how the world pulls your strings, not by touching your soul, by touching your ego. But when you act as if you are nobody, you become difficult to disturb. Now, this does not mean you become passive. It does not mean you lose ambition. It does not mean you think you are worthless. It does not mean you stop caring about excellence. This is where people misunderstand the entire idea. Acting as if you are nobody is not low self-esteem. It is self-possession. It means your worth is no longer tied to social theater. It means you no longer need a spotlight to know who you are. That is real self-respect. The loudest people in the room are often the least secure. The people obsessed with being recognized are often starving inside. The people constantly announcing their value are usually trying to convince themselves, but the one who knows rarely needs to speak. Stoicism is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming steady. And steadiness comes when you stop handing your identity to the crowd, the room where nobody knows your name. Imagine a young man walking into a room where nobody knows his name. No status, no reputation, no introduction, no special treatment. He sits quietly in the corner while others speak over each other, competing to sound impressive. One talks about money, another talks about influence, another tells stories designed to make the room admire him, and the young man feels something rise in his chest. A familiar discomfort, the urge to prove himself, to speak, to impress, to let them know he matters too. His mind starts racing. They think I'm insignificant. They don't see my potential. I should say something. I should show them who I am. But then something changes. He catches himself. And for the first time, instead of obeying that urge, he watches it. He sees it clearly. Not confidence, not truth, not strength, just ego, panicking at the thought of being nobody. So he stays silent, not out of fear, out of mastery. He listens, he observes, he notices who is insecure, who is performative, who is hungry for approval, who cannot stand 1 second of not being seen. And in that silence, he realizes something almost frightening. The room is full of prisoners,
not prisoners of circumstance, prisoners of self-image. Every sentence is a plea. Every joke is a bid for acceptance. Every opinion is secretly asking, "Do I matter here?" And because he is no longer participating in that game, he is suddenly freer than everyone else in the room. This is one of the deepest forms of power: to be present without advertising yourself, to know your value without broadcasting it, to let others underestimate you without rushing to correct them. There is enormous peace in being underestimated, because when nobody expects anything from your ego, you are free to move in reality. You can learn, you can build, you can fail privately, you can improve quietly, you can walk away without drama, you can begin again without the burden of reputation. A lot of suffering comes from trying to maintain continuity with who you used to be. I'm the smart one. I'm the successful one. I'm the strong one. I'm the one who cannot fail. I'm the one people admire. And then life does what life always does. It humiliates you. You lose the job, the relationship ends, the business fails. People forget about you. You are no longer the center of attention. You are no longer ahead. And suddenly it feels like your whole identity is collapsing. But maybe what's collapsing was never you. Maybe it was just the costume. And maybe humiliation, painful as it is one of life's most sacred gifts, because humiliation burns the false self. It exposes how much of your suffering came from attachment to image. Listen carefully. You do not suffer because you are nothing. You suffer because you are addicted to being seen as something. That is the trap. And the deeper the addiction, the fragile the life.
Why the ego never lets you rest. The ego is never satisfied. Give it success and it wants superiority. Give it attention and it wants admiration. Give it admiration and it wants immortality. It never says enough. That is why the chase for significance has no finish line. You think, once I make more money, I'll relax. But then you need more status to match the money. You think, once people respect me, I'll feel secure. But then you become terrified of losing that respect. You think, once I've proven myself, I'll be at peace. But ego does not want peace. It wants maintenance. It wants comparison. It wants competition. It wants new threats to overcome so it can keep feeling important. That is why some people reach the top and still feel empty, because the ego can achieve everything and still remain hungry. A man can build an empire and still be wounded by one insult. A woman can be admired by millions and still be crushed by one person's rejection. A genius can change history and still be tormented by insecurity. Outer success does not end inner slavery. Only detachment does. And detachment is not indifference, it is clarity. It is seeing the ego for what it is, a mental actor that survives on attention. The Stoics returned again and again to one brutal question: what is actually under my control? Not reputation, not public opinion, not whether people understand you, not whether they give you credit, not whether they interpret your intentions correctly. What is under your control is far smaller than the ego wants and far more powerful than most people realize. Your judgments, your actions, your discipline, your honesty, your response. That's it. And if you live there, inside what is yours to govern, life becomes radically simpler. You stop trying to manage everyone's perception. You stop bleeding energy into things that were never yours to hold. You stop making your peace dependent on chaos. There is a sentence hidden in this philosophy that can save years of suffering. You do not need to be recognized to be real. You do not need to be admired to be valuable. You do not need to be remembered to have lived deeply. You do not need to dominate the room to possess strength. Some of the strongest people alive
alive are unknown. They are not online, teaching the world how disciplined they are. They are waking up early without applause, keeping promises without witnesses, carrying pain without turning it into identity, doing what is right without needing credit. That is nobility, quiet, unmarketable, invisible to the shallow eye, but unbreakable. Here is the part most people never hear. Your ego does not only want to be loved, it wants to be undeniable. It wants immunity from rejection. It wants permanent proof that you matter. And because life can never give you that, ego keeps you restless forever. The man who lost his title. There was a man who built his entire identity around being respected. For years, he was the competent one, the provider, the leader, the one people called when they needed answers, the one whose opinion mattered. He entered rooms with certainty because he had a title, income, status, relevance. He thought that was strength. Then one year, almost everything changed. The company restructured. He lost the role. The calls slowed down. The invitations became fewer. People who once praised him moved on quickly. And what shocked him most was not the financial loss. It was the disappearance of reflected importance. He realized something painful. What he missed was not only the work, he missed being seen as someone. He missed the identity, the status, the image, the subtle privilege of being treated like he mattered. And without it, he felt hollow. For a while, he panicked. He talked too much about what he used to do. He dropped old accomplishments into conversations. He tried to signal that he was still relevant, but the harder he tried to hold on to the old self, the more miserable he became. Then one day, after months of inner chaos, he stopped. He stopped rehearsing his importance. He stopped introducing himself through the past. He stopped reaching for borrowed significance. And for the first time, he asked a terrifying question. If no one is impressed by me, who am I? That question broke him. And then it rebuilt him, because now he had to meet himself without decoration, no title, no audience, no applause, no identity props, just character, just habits, just the way he treated people when nobody needed anything from him, just the way he carried uncertainty when nobody was watching. That was the beginning of his freedom, because once he stopped being addicted to the old image, he became available to reality again. And many people will spend their entire lives avoiding that moment because losing status hurts. But what hurts even more is discovering how much of your life was built around being seen.
The day you stop taking everything personally. One of the clearest signs that ego is running your life is that everything feels personal. Someone ignores you, you feel insulted. Someone criticizes you, you feel attacked. Someone succeeds, you feel diminished. Someone disagrees, you feel disrespected. Someone leaves, you feel invalidated. But when you act as if you are nobody, something begins to shift. You realize most things were never about you. People project, people assume, people react from wounds you did not create. People disrespect others because they are at war with themselves. People overlook what they cannot recognize. And once you understand this, the emotional charge begins to weaken. You stop carrying every opinion like a verdict. You stop letting immature people become authors of your self-worth. You stop entering spiritual debt over somebody else's confusion. Now, this does not mean pain disappears. It means pain stops becoming ego drama. You still feel disappointment. You still feel grief. You still feel loneliness. But now those feelings move through a wider space, a space no longer crowded by the question, what does this say about me? This is one of the most healing shifts a human being can make, because that question, what does this say about me, has ruined millions of lives. He didn't call back. What does this say about me? I failed. What does this say about me? They chose someone else. What does this say about me? I got embarrassed. What does this say about me? Sometimes it says nothing about you. Sometimes life is just life. Sometimes doors close. Sometimes people misunderstand. Sometimes timing breaks. Sometimes reality refuses to flatter your self-image. And that is not always tragedy. Sometimes that is liberation, because every event that destroys your false identity reveals how much of you was built on illusion,
The Stoic does not ask, "How do I protect my pride?"
The Stoic asks, how do I remain aligned with truth? That question changes everything, because truth may say, you were attached, you were desperate for approval, you were acting from vanity, you were hurt more by embarrassment than by actual loss. Good, see it, because what you can see clearly, you can finally outgrow. Obscurity is not a curse. Modern life teaches you to fear obscurity. If nobody knows you, you feel behind. If nobody praises you, you feel small. If your work is unseen, you wonder if it matters. But obscurity has a hidden gift. It protects growth. When nobody's watching, you can become real. You can experiment without humiliation. You can fail without public identity collapse. You can sharpen your mind without announcing every lesson. You can build strength in silence. A seed does not break the ground the day it is planted. For a long time, all meaningful growth is invisible. And yet, we live in a world that only respects visible progress, visible money, visible influence, visible beauty, visible achievement. So people rush the process. They start performing the result before they've done the becoming. They brand themselves before they know themselves. They teach what they haven't lived. They display confidence they haven't earned. They chase visibility when what they actually need is depth. But depth is built in private. Character is built in private. Discipline is built in private. Emotional stability is built in private. The ability to stand alone without panic, that is built in private. Do not underestimate the years where nothing seems to be happening. Some of the most important transformations in your life will occur in seasons nobody applauds. The world will call that period boring. The Stoics would call it training. So if life has made you invisible for a while, do not rush to escape it. Maybe this is where your soul is being strengthened. Maybe this is where your need for attention is dying. Maybe this is where you are learning the difference between being admired and being anchored. One fades fast, the other survives storms. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself that he would soon be forgotten, and so would everyone else, not to depress himself, to free himself. Because if even emperors are swallowed by time, why would you hand your peace to public opinion? Why build your soul around an audience that will not remember its own thoughts by next week? Obscurity, in that sense, is not failure. It is rehearsal for truth.
The deeper fear nobody admits. Let's go deeper. Most people are not actually afraid of failure. They are afraid of being seen failing. Most people are not actually afraid of being ordinary. They are afraid of being treated as ordinary. Most people are not actually afraid of losing everything. They are afraid of losing the identity they built around having it. This is why ego creates so much suffering, because it makes image feel like life itself. And once image feels like life, anything that threatens it feels like death. That's why embarrassment feels unbearable. That's why rejection feels annihilating. That's why public failure feels apocalyptic. But when you begin acting as if you are nobody, these things lose some of their poison, not all at once, but steadily. You survive being overlooked. You survive not being chosen. You survive silence. You survive being underestimated. You survive not being explained correctly to the world. And every time you survive one of those moments without performing, you get a little freer. This is how freedom grows, not through applause, through detachment. What happens when you truly become nobody? When you truly begin to live as nobody, a few extraordinary things happen. First, you become harder to offend, not because you stop caring about truth, but because your identity is no longer made of glass. Second, you become harder to manipulate. Flattery stops working. Shame stops working. Social pressure weakens. You can hear praise without addiction and criticism without collapse. Third, you become more honest. Why? Because lying is often image protection. Pretending is image protection. Over-explaining is image protection. People-pleasing is image protection. The less attached you are to being somebody, the more natural truth becomes. Fourth, you become calmer. You stop rushing to dominate conversations. You stop panicking when others misunderstand you. You stop turning every setback into identity crisis. Fifth, you become more dangerous in the most peaceful way,
because your actions stop coming from insecurity. You are no longer trying to prove, you are simply trying to live correctly. And finally, you become more alive because attention returns to the present moment, to the wind, to the breath, to the work in front of you, to the person sitting across from you, to the simple fact that you are here. And existence itself does not require an audience to be sacred. This is what ego steals. It steals reality. It keeps you trapped in a fictional self, always managing, editing, presenting, defending. But when that fictional self loosens, life becomes vivid again. Food tastes better, silence feels cleaner, conversations become real, work becomes devotion instead of performance. You stop asking, "How am I being perceived?" and start asking, "How should I live?" That is a better question, a heavier question, a freer question, and maybe the only one that matters. So no, acting as if you are nobody is not about shrinking yourself. It is not self-hatred. It is not passivity. It is not giving up on greatness. It is giving up the theater. It is refusing to build your life on applause that can vanish in a day. It is understanding that peace begins where performance ends. The Stoics knew that death would erase titles, reputations, followers, status, and all the tiny illusions people bleed for. And instead of being terrified by that, they were clarified by it. Because if all of that disappears, then what remains? Your character, your choices, your ability to endure, your capacity to love without possession, your willingness to act rightly without reward. That is the part worth building. So the next time you walk into a room and feel the urge to prove yourself, pause. The next time someone misunderstands you and you feel that fire rise in your chest, pause. The next time life humiliates you, overlooks you, or reduces you in the eyes of others, pause. And remember, maybe this is not your destruction. Maybe this is your release. Maybe life is not taking something essential from you. Maybe it is tearing away what was never essential to begin with. Act as if you are nobody and watch how much suffering disappears. Watch how much energy returns. Watch how impossible it becomes for the world to control a person who no longer needs to be seen, because the one who needs no audience is finally free. And freedom, real freedom, has always been the deepest form of power. If this found you at the right time, then don't just watch it, sit with it. Because a lot of people hear messages like this and turn them into inspiration for one night. Then they go right back to performing in the morning. Don't do that. Take this with you the next time you want to explain yourself too much. Take it with you the next time rejection makes you question your value. Take it with you the next time your ego begs to be seen. And if you're done performing, then stay here. This channel is for people who are ready to become stronger, quieter, and harder to control. If that's you, subscribe. And if one line from this video hits something real in you, comment "free," not for me, for you. A reminder that your life does not begin when the world notices you. It begins when the world no longer owns you.